You know, burlesque is one of those things where if you know, you know. And if you don't know, you don't know. There's a lot that goes into burlesque, and it is a incredibly foreign concept and performance style to a lot of people. And I know a lot of the time, for a lot of people, myself included, the very first time you go to a burlesque show, your mind might be blown and you may have a million questions. These are some of the most common questions that we tend to see, or comments even, from audience members or people who I just tell for the first time that I do burlesque. Prepare to see me look hecka queer. So how did you get into it? Burlesque is one of these fascinating performance styles that has so many different ways you can get involved and start performing or producing or being involved. We tend to join burlesque through classes and workshops. There are a lot of burlesque teachers across the globe. It's going to look very different depending on your city and who's teaching or your town, but the main way that we tend to see is people paying for and taking burlesque classes from professionals. Another way we tend to see is maybe if you know a producer or if you're an audience member who goes to watch a lot of shows. A lot of performers I know started because they just talked to producers and asked them questions and asked the other performers how they got involved. Granted, most of us will say take a class, but often you can also talk to a producer and ask if you could stage kitten a show or volunteer at the door or do merchandise. There's a few different ways to get on stage, maybe even just having coffee or going for a walk with an established performer to ask questions and they can help you along the way. And there's other burlesque performers I know who got involved and started performing because they had a mentor and eventually worked on an act with them and workshopped, and then eventually they got their time on stage after they applied to a show. Oh, you're so confident. I could never do that. I don't have your perfect physique to be on stage. This is one. Confidence. Confidence is an interesting concept when we talk about burlesque. A lot of us are really good at faking it. I get so many people talking to me all the time about how brave I am to be doing burlesque, how brave it is to take your clothes off in front of people you don't know. A lot of people don't realize how diverse burlesque is. I actually have a video right here that you can check out that's talking all about is burlesque diverse and some of the reasons why we are and are not. But for the most part, long story short, we are incredibly diverse. It does not matter your gender, your sexuality, your ability, your ethnicity. We all belong on a burlesque stage. If you want to perform, then perform. And it's one of those beautiful things that you can do it. A lot of the time as well, some things that we tend to see as performers is a thing called imposter syndrome, and because of social media and because of how we present ourselves on stage, we often come off as these amazing godlike figures or even just really empowered beings, especially when we regularly see burlesque promoted as a performance community that is diverse with representation and body love and self-expression and confidence. Just because we preach it doesn't mean we don't feel it still. Confidence is one of those things where it is a journey, it is a lifelong path for many of us. It is something that we are working towards. Burlesque is not the answer. Many of us, it is a stepping stone towards building our own confidence, or maybe building on our own stage fright or fear of people judging us or imposter syndrome or whatever internal things are going on. You do not have to be confident to do burlesque. So what is the difference between burlesque and stripping? So burlesque and stripping. This is a conversation that has been going on for a very long time, and there are a lot of lines that are very difficult to tell, like what's burlesque and what's stripping. For a lot of it, burlesque and stripping both came from the same roots. There's so much that gets questioned of, well, what's the difference? Or isn't burlesque just classy stripping? Burlesque is this empowering art form, and stripping is something you do when you have to make ends meet. It is so disempowering. It has stigma attached to it, and often because of that, stripping has a whole lot of appropriation that comes out of it, where people are teaching pole classes or heels classes or wearing pleasers or having stripper nails, but really try really hard to distance themselves from stripping and say they're not a stripper. Oh, I do burlesque, but I'm not a stripper. That is incredibly classist and not okay. The main difference for me that I tend to describe the two is stripping is a job, It's an industry. You do not strip as a hobby, and you cater to your audience. They live off of their tips, and it's expected that whoever is attending as an audience member will be tipping the performer. Something I saw really interesting recently was how you are performing to the audience's fantasy. Well, burlesque, you are performing your fantasy. And I think that's a really interesting thing, because so much of burlesque, we have people who do it as a hobby. We have people who are professionals. We have people who travel, people who decide to stay in their own hometowns. And there's so much space to make burlesque what you want of it. We have guaranteed rates where it's not a fluctuating pay scale. I get to be fully in control of my act. I get to choose what I do on stage. If the audience likes it, then cool. If they don't like it, depending on the performer and their perspective, maybe they're just happy to express themselves and get on stage and put on the makeup or dance or move or be funny or whatever their burlesque is. And I have another video that you can watch right here that does go more in depth of the differences and the similarities, and some of the things to be aware of when we're talking about stripping and burlesque, because there are a lot of similarities and we do walk alongside each other, but we are still our own unique performance styles, and both of us deserve our own respect in what we do. So what's your real name? Nope, nope, red flag. Sometimes it's a yellow flag, depending on the context. Do not ask a performer what their real name is. I mentioned this in my previous video, but I thought I'd mention it again here. We have burlesque names and performer names or drag names. Sometimes it's safety. I don't want people to know my real name. And then another part of that is this fantasy. As soon as you walk into that theater, I want you to feel the fantasy. I want you to feel like you're in this magical place that sparkles. As soon as Cherry Cheeks is taken away and you ask me my real name, and if I were to give it to you, suddenly that changes the dynamic a lot. Where does burlesque happen? Burlesque can happen in almost any place you can think of. We have burlesque in restaurants, we have it in movie theaters sometimes, we have it in performance theaters, hotels. Sometimes you'll see it in the conference rooms for private events. I performed at a tattoo expo once. We have burlesque in music festivals and in their own burlesque festivals, cabaret style venues, or your community theaters. Even dance studios sometimes will have a studio rented out and they'll do a small personal show with friends and family. Anywhere that you can think of, for the most part, will have burlesque. And again, I have another video. I feel so good that I have enough videos that I can just say now in this video like how many videos to check out. And I'll have links down below as well with all the videos I mentioned. So burlesque, long story short, it can happen anywhere. How does your partner feel that you do burlesque? Does your family know? People are curious. What do families think? What do partners think? Some performers do keep their life completely separate from burlesque and their families don't know. Partners do know. It's kind of hard to avoid that part. We're conscious of when we tell partners if we start to see somebody new, or some of us don't care because it's just who we are. We'll just say it right away and it's an easy way to filter through. Burlesque is one of those things where, for the most part, a lot of us are very open about it, and partners know and families might know. Partners and family might be supportive, they might be kind of questioning it. Burlesque is still stigmatized today, despite how much we talk about how welcoming it is and how it's not marginalized or not sex work. But we do still have stigma because of that nudity aspect. Things like nudity and stigma does have a scale, even though burlesque is tends to be closer to the edge of that scale of being okay and accepted. There are still people who are not accepting of it, and there are performers I know who do quit burlesque because their partners are not okay with it, maybe their work is not okay with it. It's really unique to each person. I love men who do burlesque, but like, why are they all gay? There are so many questions around men in burlesque. There's people who ask if men do burlesque, people ask if they're all gay, or why are they all gay. For one, gender is not a binary, so we have performers of all gender identities who do burlesque. It doesn't only impact femmes, it impacts men just as much. And so yeah, of course there's going to be men who do burlesque who want to reclaim their body or represent their body type, or do whatever they need to do to get that self-expression, or to enjoy themselves, or just be funny, or just be sexy, or just tell a story, or whatever the genre or theme or style is that they like to do in burlesque. We have straight men, we have gay men, We have queer men, trans men, asexuals or aromantic men. Sexuality, just like gender, is not binary, so we have performers from a whole bunch of different genders, a whole bunch of different sexualities. I've mentioned this before, where masculine people in burlesque tend to be a novelty. If you're an audience member not used to that, sometimes they do get a little bit more rowdy when they see a male performer on stage. Or maybe they'll get a massive applause just for walking on stage. They didn't even do their act yet. People's sexuality is not necessarily your business. So if people are gay, sweet, good for them. If they're straight, also sweet, good for them. But like, how naked do you get? My own mother, for a really long time, thought burlesque was getting down to like essentially a bathing suit. She's so cute. For the most part, it depends on your state or province what your nudity laws are. And so in my stripping video, I did talk about nudity laws and how different it is depending on where you're performing. Where I live in British Columbia, Canada, I am spoiled. We are spoiled. We have very, very limited nudity laws here, so some people do get naked. Because of that, people get used to that, but that's not always the case. Producers are gonna have different styles and different regulations for their own shows. You usually go down to underwear and pasties, which cover up. That is pretty standard in burlesque for the most part. There's a lot of places where a province or a state where the nudity laws say you can't touch an audience member. You have to cover up your under boob. Top cleavage is okay, but not under boob, or even your butt has to be covered X amount. I was in a show once where I had to like put electrical tape because my pasties didn't cover enough, so I had to put electrical tape underneath and had to be inspected to make sure I had it covered enough. But it really depends on the show, the venue, the state, the province. One strip at a time, we are trying to loosen those laws a little bit. Those are some of the main questions that we tend to get in burlesque. There are many more in comments. I'm sure there's going to be quite a few videos in the future eventually on this topic. If you are a burlesque performer, I'm curious, what are some of the main questions that you tend to see or get? Leave them down below. Feel free to leave your own answers if you have a particular answer you like to give to that question, or even if you do have a question, feel free to leave it down below. Again, you don't know what you don't know, and so feel free to go for it. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye!